I'm David Burnie, founder of the Burnie Group, and today I'm interviewing Doug Heintzman, who's the head of our innovation practice. Good afternoon, Doug.
Hi.
I'm looking forward to speaking to you today about the topic of blockchain.
Okay.
So Doug, $3.1 trillion by 2030. This is a lot of money.
Yes.
This is going to be big.
That's what Gartner is projecting.
So tell me, is this just us taking costs out of our current way of operating? How exactly is this going to generate revenue?
Well, it's going to ramp up, right, over a bunch of years, but I believe it's going to actually be broken down into three major components.
Okay.
Right. The first part are the clients that we work with every day,
right.
Today. They're traditional clients that have business problems, and they've got processes that are potentially inefficient, and they want to figure out how to do things better, stronger, faster. And it's completely natural that you sit around and say, hey, someone's invented something new. Can I use this new thing to solve this problem?
Right, so it's going to take the current way that we operate and make it better.
That's right.
Okay.
And an awful lot of the very first proof of concept projects out there that have been going on in this first wave of adoption for the last few years are in fact big banks, big insurance companies doing exactly those experiments, trying to figure out if they can apply this to the existing business problems.
Okay, so that's one bucket.
That's one bucket.
Third. What's the second bucket?
The second bucket, I'm not sure it's the third, by the way. I think it's probably smaller than that.
Okay.
Right? So the second bucket is its role as an accelerator. There's lots of other kinds of technologies that are all converging at this point in history, notably among them artificial intelligence, which is going to pervade our lives, IoT, right? The reality that we're going to have all these inexpensive network-connected sensors that are going to give us complete awareness of our environment and collect vast amounts of data that we can do analytics on and things like that.
It's like a container ship that can track if a door has been opened, if the temperature has changed, or where it might be positioned in the world.
That's exactly right, and that will completely change the way that people plan their supply chains and their logistics and the way they insure it, right? So that industry will be substantively disrupted by what we call remote container management, that reality.
And blockchain enables that.
Well, that's right. So its role as an accelerator is that when you've got all of this data coming in from all of these sensors, it's generating vast amounts of little snippets of information. There is a significant bottleneck in traditional kind of centralized architectures to deal with that. We have to move to a distributed database architecture where we have ledgers that are recording all of those events. And of course, if there are big issues about, if something bad happens and it triggers this contractual condition or this insurance policy pays off, these are important triggers that we need to be very assured about. So we need to have that assuredness, and we need to have the performance characteristics that allow us to process all of that information. So you need a different kind of architecture than traditional architectures to deal with that.
So blockchain does it faster and more efficiently than today's databases?
It allows you to process the interaction of sensors into lots of versions of the ledger, and then have the ledgers actually synchronize their various different inputs.
Right.
So it also allows, if a sensor needs to be triggered by something, an actuator, some decision, that it can be done much more efficiently without having to go through the entire system, because there's basically a local version of the data that's required to generate that decision point. So it's a much better architecture to tackle that kind of problem.
Okay, so many of these innovations that we're hearing about today, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things,
3D printing.
3D printing, all of these will be enabled. Blockchain will be a key enabler for
Well, that's right.
those.
3D printing is actually a really good example, because traditionally speaking, the value in manufacturing was taking big things, creating smaller components out of those big things, and then assembling those components into composite machines and then selling them. And so there was advantage in scale, and that's why we have big factories in various different cities around the world that make cars or refine various different raw materials and turn them into products. And but in a world where we can build stuff from small common components, whether it's titanium sintering or it's plastics or whatever. We can build things.
Lego for my son's upcoming birthday.
You could build, exactly. If you wanted specialized Lego that you could make, a car or a dinosaur or whatever, and you could actually make it yourself, or go to a factory down at the corner and give them a spec and have them make it a one-of, right? You don't need to make them in units of millions to do it affordably. You can make them in units of one. Well, the value suddenly shifts from the advantages of scale in a company, in a factory, to the digital file, right? It becomes the intellectual property that you're sending to the 3D printer to build it. That's where the value is. This is a part for an airplane engine, right? The value is in all of the engineering and testing that was done to produce that file, that digital file, that then gets sent to the machine to tell it how to build it.
But why do I need blockchain? Can't I just upload a file and, the Lego for my son, can't I just order it from Lego? And
right, but so the problem is the same as what happened with music, right? Once something is digital, it can be copied, right? And so everyone can have a copy of it. And the fact that you could kind of post it and everyone can get access to it, it erodes all the value of that thing, right? Its value falls to zero in a very big hurry, which disincentivizes people from building very expensive to build models to do this kind of stuff.
So can this transform the music industry?
Absolutely, and it already is, right? So, the music industry has had to shift from, people have never listened to more music than we do today and own so little of it, right? The idea of ownership has kind of fallen off. And the reason is because music is digital and it moves around so, frictionlessly, and there's no value in the ownership of things because we don't have a mechanism to do it. But if we had a 3D printer that could only print off something if a file that was, had all the right codes to handshake with the thing, and that a record that I made this product was associated with this file, and the people who created the intellectual property behind that file were appropriately compensated based on the contract that I agreed to for permission to use the file, then I can build an industry around this situational building of highly specialized things. But I need to be able to enforce digital scarcity on that file for that business model to work. And that's what blockchain can do.
So Doug, the first bucket is around doing things better with what we have today. The second bucket is enabling new technologies like AI, 3D printing, the Internet of Things. Tell me a bit about that third bucket of opportunity.
The third bucket, which I think is going to be by far the biggest bucket of all of these things. And if you go back and you look at history and you think about what happens when people ask the question differently, instead of saying, I've got this business process, is this technology something I could use to do it any better? Instead of that question, ask the question, I've got this new technology, what could I build on top of it that didn't exist before? And if you look at the great companies that we all think of today, the Googles, the Amazons, the eBays, the Facebooks, and even the modern Apple, right? All of these companies were people that asked that question, that created completely new business models on top of a new infrastructure. This was true of electricity, this was true of steam, this was true of all the big kind of platform innovations. So this is the question, I think, the fundamental question that these fourth generation platforms are out to address. Those people that say, hey, what could I build on top of this new infrastructure? The slight difference here, and I think it's a huge accelerator versus the previous historical examples of this phenomena, is that you now have this trust infrastructure, right? If you think about the reason that companies exist, they exist because there are in the real world frictions around transactions. There's informational frictions. Do I know something? Where do I find something? Do you have this product in stock? What are its features? All those kinds of things. The internet's been a great boon to that. You can discover amazing things and who's got what and find stuff on the other side of the planet that you might need. But then there's a second friction, which are the trust frictions, right? That says, do I know you? Have I got a history with you? Am I willing to risk sending you a whole bunch of money, hoping you'll send me your product? We've had to use some third parties.
It's like eBay. Are you trusted on eBay when I'm buying something on eBay?
Right, or even that you even have third party intermediating that payment with PayPal, right? It says, I'm not actually paying you directly, I'm paying PayPal, PayPal's paying you. So we've used a bunch of third parties in order to mitigate that trust deficit. And that's the reason companies exist, right? You've got a sales department, a marketing department, a legal department, an R&D department, a production department, and inside of that, everyone's signed the same NDAs and have the same employment contracts so that they can all talk to each other without all that friction. And that's why companies have an advantage in creating value. But the question these fourth generation platforms, these new business network platforms are asking is, what happens if that's not true anymore? What happens if you can create an ecosystem, create a domain around a particular topic, travel, insurance, manufacturing, where a supply chain, where people can enter into that domain and join a business network and have very efficient information and a very powerful trust framework that allows them to exchange goods and services and ideas with the same kind of efficiency a traditional company does, because all of their interactions are bound by all of these smart contracts.
So it essentially decentralizes control, and so you don't have that one powerful corporation sitting in the center.
That's right. And more than that, these business networks can be much more agile than a traditional company. New entrants can come in and join voluntarily instead of a company kind of going out and having to acquire something and deal with all that friction of trying to integrate their operations. And units that aren't adding value to the ecosystem, they will naturally kind of fall out of the ecosystem because they're not adding any value that people in the ecosystem are wanting to pay for. And so these business networks have the potential of being tremendously more agile and much more inventive than a traditional company does, and has much less kind of institutional friction, that inertia problem that big companies have. And that, I believe, is where the vast majority of that big Gartner $3.1 trillion of new economic value by 2030 is going to come from.